government's chilling lack of compassion and empathy is on full display, not only in East Palestine, Ohio, but across the globe. Policies which lack human sympathy portend greater and greater destruction. My fellow Americans, it is time to revive the spirit of America so that each one of us truly believes in the ability of the nation to function for the benefit of all of us. It is time to make real the dream of prosperity for all. It is time to make real the dream of education for all, and health care for all, and jobs for all, retirement security, and safe neighborhoods. It is time to revive the spirit of patriotism, which reflects a daily celebration of freedom where Americans are free from government prying and spying into their personal lives, and where each of us is free to make decisions about our own lives, our own health, and our own beings. It is time, I'm almost there. It is time to revive the spirit of truth, of peace. The scriptures say, "Blessed are the peacemakers." It is time for America to establish a new role in the world where we demand of our leaders the ability to reconcile with other nations, to make peace with our brothers and sisters. We must coalesce as a nation to seek and define the underlying unity which binds us as Americans. Love of life binds us. Love of peace binds us. Love of country binds us. Brotherhood and sisterhood binds us. Love of home binds us. Love of church, synagogue, temple, and mosque binds us. Love of work binds us. Love binds us all in a union of hope. And as we revive our oneness as a nation, we proclaim the deeper meaning of our first national motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, we are one. It is then we can truly unite with the rest of the world, for human unity is the ultimate truth. We are interconnected and interdependent with people everywhere. And as nations strive for self-sufficiency, so too they must strive for cooperation. It is human unity which will save our planet from destruction and enable us to achieve a heaven on earth. It is the realization that we are, all of us, created equal and entitled to self-determination and self-fulfillment, individually and collectively. My fellow Americans, this our country, this land we love, to whom Americans pledge allegiance, must in turn pledge its allegiance to we the people, allegiance to truth, to one nation, under God, truly with liberty and justice for all. Let us proceed then by these words from Lincoln's second inaugural, with malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Up next we have former member of Congress Tulsi Gabbard. Give her a hand.
Aloha. Early one morning on a Saturday, on a beautiful day like today, in January of 2018, over 1 million people all across the state of Hawaii woke to their cell phones buzzing and ringing, radio alerts blaring, with a message that read, "Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill." I and so many others, I happened to be here that morning. I started calling my friends and calling my family, concerned for them and where they were. But just as you here might imagine, if we all got that alert at this moment, so too did people all across Hawaii start to ask themselves the question, where is their shelter? Where do I go? Where do I take my children to be safe, knowing that there is an inbound missile to Hawaii with a nuclear warhead and we have just minutes to live? We had college students at the University of Hawaii sprinting across campus trying to figure out where they could possibly go to get shelter. A father who lowered his little girl down a manhole thinking that may be the only place she may be safe, and telling her goodbye. I might not see you again. I heard after from a father who had one kid in town on the island of Oahu and another child on the other side of the island, and himself in the middle trying to decide which of his children he might spend the last of his minutes with. An impossible decision for any parent to make. Countless others shared their stories of their panic, cowering in the bathtub with their kids, trying to understand. They're telling us to seek immediate shelter. Where do we go? And experiencing that harsh reality. That was as true for us there in Hawaii in 2018 as it is for us here today. There is no shelter. Our leaders failed us then, and they continue to fail us now. Those people who work in our nation's capital eagerly continue to escalate tensions, eagerly wage new Cold Wars, understanding that if there's a nuclear attack, yes, they will be okay in their bunkers, where they literally have plans to be able to continue to wage wars from their bunkers without any consideration for the rest of us and the destruction and incineration that their wars will cause. This was ultimately the thing that caused me to run for president in 2020, because I saw where our leaders were taking us. I saw the dangers of where this new Cold War and nuclear arms race would eventually lead. Whether intentional or accidental, there is only one destination for such wars, and that is a nuclear holocaust. I made it clear then that this is a central issue of our time, the most important issue facing us in the 21st century, and that there was a clear choice in that election. We're either going to work towards peace, de-escalate tensions, move away from this new Cold War, or we will continue to race rapidly towards the nuclear brink, toward a new Cold War with Russia, a new Cold War with China, and therefore racing towards nuclear war. Now, for those of you who remember that election, this issue was not important to the media. They refused to talk about it. They refused to raise the question in the debates. There was no other candidate willing to talk about this issue. It was not important to them then, and it's not important to them now. And so here we are, 2 short years later. What I warned about then is now our reality. This proxy war that we're fighting against Russia right now could turn at any moment into a direct conflict between the United States, NATO, and Russia, a country that has more nuclear weapons than any other in the world. Now, anyone with a little bit of common sense knows that a Cold War can very quickly turn to a hot war, and that when you're waging a hot war against a nuclear-armed country, it's just a matter of time before it leads to the use of nuclear weapons at any moment. And here's the insanity of it all. We have talking heads on TV, we have politicians, we have very powerful people here in the United States and all around the world speaking with a straight face, well, you know, if we start World War III or when World War III starts, here's how we're going to fight and win. That if Putin decides to use tactical nuclear weapons, here's what we're going to do, as though such a war could ever be won. It cannot be won. World War III cannot be won. They're living in this archaic mindset of World War I and World War II and not facing the realities that we have today. There is no way to win a nuclear war. There is only one end, and that is a nuclear holocaust. So we're gathered here today because we know that it doesn't have to be this way. We know that there is a better way and that the task before us is urgent and necessary. We have people gathered here from all over the country, people who are gathered here from all ends of the political spectrum. And if we were to have a conversation, my guess is there may be other things we don't agree on. But the truth is that we could disagree about everything else. Everything else. But the one thing that we do agree on that brings us together here today is that we value life. We want to live. We want our loved ones to live and thrive. We want to be able to go out on a day like today and walk in the trees and hear the birds chirping with the sun shining down on our face. We understand that whatever our differences may be, that we must stand together as people who cherish peace, security, and freedom. We must set aside our differences, work together to fire those warmongering politicians from both political parties who serve their masters in the military-industrial complex instead of serving the people. Those warmongers who carelessly and thoughtlessly are sending us hurtling towards a nuclear holocaust that would destroy all life and the world as we know it. The only way we can stop them is when we stand together and lift our voices in unity, telling them no. We will not let you destroy us. We will not let you destroy our loved ones, our communities, our country, here in the United States and around the world. If we stand together on this one issue, we will be able to wrest the power away from those who don't care about us, those who bend the knee to their overlords in the military-industrial complex, take back that power and ensure that we take those trillions of dollars they are feeding into the war machine and instead dedicate those resources towards peace, prosperity, and freedom. We cannot be free and prosperous or safe unless we are at peace. We are the spark that has the power to light that fire to bring about change. So let that spark of love that exists in every single one of our hearts, that aloha, be that inspiration and that fuel that provides us with the courage to fight against these powerful entities, knowing that our cause is just, it is right, and it is necessary. We must work together towards this future in fulfilling and accomplishing this mission of peace. Thank you very much. Aloha.
Thank you so much for that unifying message.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, give it up for the Congresswoman.
All right. Up next, we've got the man, the myth, the legend, the hero of the Liberty Movement, former presidential candidate, and former congressman. Let's give it up for Congressman Dr. Ron Paul. In the Fed. Oh, right over here.
They stole my line. No, I was going to say and open up by saying thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. I like to visit places where I have friends. There are a lot of friends of liberty out here and a lot of friends of peace. So I get energized with coming here. A lot of people give me some credit for coming and helping them along. But the truth is, I get energized. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for inviting me. You know, I was going to say that we've heard a lot of speeches and a lot of opinions, and everybody has joined in. I didn't hear anybody saying we need to expand the war. We're not doing well in Ukraine, but we need to take on the Russians. That'll go better. Oh, no, we need to go to China, and we're still struggling in Syria. No, nobody's for that. At least I haven't heard them. They didn't get a place. I hope they didn't ever get a place on the platform for that. So this has been, wonderful to come to a place that comes together on this issue. But the one thing is that I've emphasized over the years when speaking in a couple of campaigns is that, it's serious. And we just heard a very serious dissertation about how serious the problem we deal with. But, with that, understanding how serious this is, my admonition is always come together and have fun. And I understand a lot of people have been having fun today, meeting new people and joining. I think that's great. But I also came because I've been concerned. I've been really worried about something, and I haven't figured it out yet. I'm not into technology and all, but I want to know more about this thing called artificial intelligence. What is that all about? But I figured it out. I put up with it for 23 years in the Congress, and there was a lot of artificial intelligence over there, let me tell you. A lot of innuendos and whatnot. But I wanted to simplify my speech, and of course somebody stole my line. But I think that we can deal with the war issue very simply. And believe me, and I'll explain it more why I believe this, that the answer is end the Fed. I knew there were friends here. Thank you. No, and there's a reason why ending the Fed is a movement towards stopping these wars. How do they finance them? They have to tax the people. Well, they tax them with income taxes and all kinds of taxes, but they never have enough money. They never have enough money, so they have to borrow a lot of money, and then people get tired borrowing the money and loaning the money to the government. So what do? They have this little gimmick called run up the debt and print the money. And if you're on the side of thinking our government is too big, and as libertarians, we generally think the government's too big all over the place, and we'd like to cut back. So if you can't print the money, and you can't collect the taxes by debasing the currency and stealing the wealth from the people, unnerving the middle class and the poor, because that's who really pays for this, you couldn't have a war. You couldn't have runaway spending. You couldn't have debts. And we should have it in the Constitution, and Jefferson argued for it. He said that you shouldn't even be allowed to have debt. I think that's a pretty good idea. No debt at all. So that is the way they do. Soften it up, and the people go along with it and figure that, yes, we can do it, but they don't understand what's happening. But why do the people go along with it? And we spent a lot of time over the Mideast wars trying to stop that war. I didn't do too well. They still had the war. And you keep wondering, why do they do it? Why does the government do it? It doesn't make any sense. And why do the people go to war? One thing I'd like to suggest is if we ever got around to thinking that we ought to vote on the wars instead of letting an executive order take us to war, we ought to have a vote. If you think you should have a war, have a vote and make sure that the vote is carried out by the people between 18 and 24. That is the group that gets punished the most, and the others could recreate the wars. But, trying to figure still out of that, I thought I'd ask this guy that sort of just helped destroy Germany, Hermann Göring. You remember him? And he has a famous quote out there. Why do the people do it? And this was after he was convicted at Nuremberg. That he had some interviews. And they said, why did the people do it? And he had two things. He says, one, you got to lie to the people, and they have to be big lies. If they're just routine lies, they won't believe it. But if they're so big and so outrageous, they'll say nobody could believe that's true, and they'd ignore it. But tell big lies and tell them often so people will go along with the war. Yeah, but still, why do the people do it and they march off? And a lot of the wars start off, people were against the war. World War II and certainly the Middle Eastern wars, the people were opposed to it. But and this is Goring, and I'll paraphrase, of course. He says, scare the living daylights out of the people. Tell them they aren't patriotic and they aren't for peace. And embarrass them. He says it works every time in every system of government in every country. Just scare the living daylights out of people. And, I think that type of an analysis applies to our war. Scare the people and patriotism. And I'll bet you there's many people in this audience that have had to be on the receiving end of that type of thing. Oh, you're not for the war, so you're un-American. And they did that once to me in the campaign. And it turned out that they were accusing me of being unpatriotic. I wouldn't support the war. You wouldn't support the troops. But when somebody came up with a statistic, it showed that Ron Paul had the most donations from the military. And then I got to thinking, well, why should that be a surprise? I was in the military. They sort of drafted me, and I was in. But the people I knew, they were decent people, and the draft was on at that time. And they would say, well, why are you doing this? And the draft, of course, has not been used, but there's other ways of doing it. The book should be clean. We should, if we're not for the draft, why do we have registration? They know where every one of us is. Not every year where you sign up with taxes. Every minute of the day, they know where every one of us is, and then they still make us go through the ritual of registering in case there's a war going on. It's psychological preparation for people to know that if you want to be a good citizen and you want to be a patriot, you have to go to the wars. And people go along with that, and they don't want to be called unpatriotic. And I think we all sense and understand and may have some empathy for that, but it's wrong. It's deception, and it's part of this thing called artificial intelligence. They come in and they lie through their teeth, and it's all artificial. But the artificialness of it, is such that what you hear there, it might be disinformation, and they have to twist it around. If an individual is guilty of disinformation, have you ever noticed they might blame their opposition for doing exactly what they're doing? And, they reverse it, and so there's a lot of fakery. So this gets down to the whole issue of seeking truth in the big picture. We seek truth as we come to events like this, and when we run for office and we write and talk, and so many people here have their own way of spreading a message. So yes, that is real good. But what we need, though, is some people really understanding the issues, because that is what will finally get people to change their minds rather than waiting. One of the lines that was helpful for me in the campaigning, they would say, yeah, Ron, that's okay. We're with you on this, but it's so complicated. Well, how do you stop these wars? And I said, you just marched in, we can just march home. But now I've changed that a little bit. We shorten that. We have to anticipate, just don't send them in at all. There's such a fallacy, and this is part of the propaganda thing, that is so necessary, not for patriotic reasons, but for other reasons. And there's always an excuse. The one that annoys me the most, or at least close to the most, is this argument. They'll say, we need a good war right now. We're having a recession. Have a war and we'll get out of the recession. And this is a lingering of a foolhardy idea that the World War II got us out of the Great Depression. That's stupid. It wasn't true at all. The Depression got worse. Besides, we sent hundreds of thousands of people over getting shot at and killed, and they say, oh, the war's good. That'll get us out of our depression. So there's all kinds of excuses like that, and they don't mention the many things that have already been mentioned at this conference, that there's ulterior motives and like profits. And we're getting too many of these special groups, like the military-industrial complex. We have the pharmaceutical-industrial complex, the medical-industrial complex, and the whole works. What we need to do is have a people's independence, and they're the ones who should be looked at. And another little rule that I think we should follow is that, and this is one word. I like to narrow down my philosophy. And the other word that I like is voluntarism. Wouldn't that be a wonderful world to live in, that if you apply voluntarism, which is nonviolence, and you have voluntarism, what do you mean? Does that mean you can go to the store and buy what you want? No, voluntarism means that everything is done when it involves two groups or two people voluntarily. Both sides have to agree. Otherwise, you avoid it. You can't force anybody to do anything. And you know what would happen? Peace would break out. So therefore, you have to have the hoodlums up there making it so that it's not voluntary. And then somebody gets to write a lot of regulations, and they get to do all the nonsense they do, and then they bankrupt the country. So that's the problem. I think voluntarism is just a great idea. And the other thing is when government comes to knocking on your door, that is the tough thing. And they will tell you one reason why they're doing this, because we're on the side of truth and the side of democracy and all these things. I work on the assumption of the issue of truth, I think, is very, very important. That's what we're seeking here. That's why you're here. But we know the truth. We generally agree with peace is good and war is bad. So we're pretty good on that. But we have to realize that a lot of other people, have to say that a lot of other people don't know much about it. I have a personal belief that we as individuals also seek for excellence and virtue. If we accept voluntarism and we accept this promotion of excellence and virtue, what would happen with that? If that happened, the government would be minuscule and they would be much better and maybe a little more virtuous. Thank you very much.
Ron Paul!
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Our last closing video is a video sent specially to us by Roger Waters, international rock icon. And right after that, we're going to be marching to the White House.
We've got additional speakers at the White House, too.
Welcome! I have to shout because I'm in Switzerland. Can you hear me? Okay. When I was a young man, my mother once told me this: Roger, throughout your life, you will be faced with many difficult questions and quandaries. My advice to you, when you are, is this: read, read, read. Listen to all sides of the argument, especially from those you don't always agree with. Research thoroughly. When you have, you will have done all the heavy lifting. The next bit is easy. So what is the next bit, Mum? Then you just do the right thing.
The invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation was illegal. I condemn it in the strongest possible terms. Also, the Russian invasion of Ukraine was not unprovoked. So I also condemn the provocateurs in the strongest possible terms.
So, on behalf of the silent majority, I now address President Biden. Let us be very clear, Mr. President. I speak for the voiceless majority. You and Antony Blinken and Victoria Nuland and Jake Sullivan and the rest of the warmongering neocons at the heart of government here in Washington, along with the vassal states in NATO, are the principal provocateurs that I mentioned. I am not apologizing for Mr. Putin, you understand, but just to glance fleetingly back at the history of the last 30 years or so, you could have done better. You could have followed President Gorbachev's lead in 1989. You could have kept Secretary of State Baker's promise not to advance NATO 1 yard closer to the Russian border than the eastern extremities of a reunited Germany. You could have responded to President Putin's overtures in his famous 10th of February 2007 speech at the Security Conference in Munich, and shepherded us all towards a much, much safer Europe. Or, in 2008, you could have chosen not to expand NATO eastwards. Or, in 2014, you could have refrained from engineering the illegal Maidan coup d'etat in Ukraine. Or, in 2019, you could have supported the Minsk Accords. Now we're told by Angela Merkel they were just a ruse to buy time to arm Ukraine for the war that you were engineering. But they were also, the Minsk Accords that is, the platform that President Zelensky ran on during his presidential campaign. Well, you fooled me, President Zelensky. I thought you meant all that stuff about ending the civil war in the Donbass and giving Russia, your neighbor, some security assurances. I thought you were coming to your senses. Not a bit of it. In 2022, February, March, and April, you could have told Boris Johnson not to fly to Kiev to scupper the peace negotiations, but you chose not to. And then, in September 2022, according to world-renowned investigative reporter Seymour Hersh, you blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. If that turns out to be true, a blatant act of war and an extreme act of global terrorism, releasing, as it did, 300,000 tons of methane into the atmosphere over the Baltic Sea. First, you, Mr. President, boasted openly about your intention and ability to do it. And then recently, Victoria Nuland boasts about how pleased she is that it's a, quote, hunk of junk at the bottom of the sea. And Antony Blinken boasts how perfectly its destruction suits the US imperial agenda. And now, to cap it all off, you have your idiot mouthpiece, Nick Price, deny that the USA had anything to do with it. We have heard no statement from you, Mr. President. There is no mainstream media coverage. I guess you and the mainstream media think Cy Hersh's piece and the mysterious exploding pipeline is just of no interest to the people. Enough is enough. We demand change. Do the right thing. Implement a ceasefire in Ukraine today. Imagine the collective sigh of relief across the globe, the outpouring of joy, the international joining of voices in harmony, singing an anthem to peace. Imagine John Lennon pumping the air with his fist from beyond the grave. You have finally been heard in the corridors of power. The big, dumb bullies in the schoolyard have agreed to stop playing nuclear chicken. Together, we the people can persuade the powers that be to drop the model of perpetual war as their accepted modus operandum. With the power of love, we will stop them from squandering our precious resources on their wars. We will be able to feed our children and keep them sheltered from the storm. We may even learn to cooperate with all our brothers and sisters of different ethnicities, religions, and nationalities, and save this, our beautiful planet home, from destruction. Wouldn't that be nice?
We didn't plan that part. It was kind of impromptu, so.
Thank you,
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Now we march. Get ready. It's going to line up over here. It's going to be starting there. It's going to be going along this side of the reflecting pool to 17th Street up to Pennsylvania Avenue. See you guys on the march.